22 deaths and more than 70 people who have visited health facilities so far. The country is in a cholera crisis, and the government can't say they didn't see this coming. Good evening, and welcome to Unfiltered. I'm Sizwe Mpofu Walsh. Who will ultimately take the fall for the Hammanskraal cholera deaths? Tonight, we welcome Minister of Water and Sanitation, Senzo Kumi, to hopefully give South Africans some answers. As usual, you're welcome to share your thoughts with us on Twitter. @Unfiltered SABC is our handle. Before we get into the conversation, let's first watch this insert for some more context.
Water is life. Sanitation is dignity. And so goes the cliche. A sober reminder that both these basic needs are essential for human life. Yet, in Hammanskraal, north of Pretoria, residents have been without water for close to 2 decades. In July 2014, the area experienced a diarrhea outbreak with over 70 people treated in hospital. In 2019, a study by the organization Undoing Tax Abuse discovered that the area's drinking water was contaminated by E. coli. Through this time, politicians came and went and made promises.
I came here today with the cabinet. The first thing we wanted to do is to see the water for ourselves. To go and see and really put out what problem it is.
Corruption and an unstable government have plagued the Tshwane municipality for years, affecting general service delivery.
If we think the water of Hammanskraal is clean, we have brought you water, we can drink it with you, and we must get sick, both of us.
It is not only the residents of Hammanskraal who are affected by the problem of water and sanitation. Early this year, calls intensified for government to eradicate pit toilets in schools, following yet another shocking incident where the body of a 4-year-old girl was found inside a pit toilet at a primary school in the Eastern Cape. In January of 2014, 5-year-old Michael Komape drowned in a pit toilet at Mahlodumela Primary School in Limpopo. The latest household survey paints a bleak picture. 74% of families in Limpopo use pit latrines. More than 1/3, or nearly 37% of households in Mpumalanga and about 20.5% in the Northwest Province use pit toilets. At the moment, South Africa is reportedly among the 16 African countries affected by the recent cholera outbreak. Almost 30 years into democracy, South Africa's poor remain vulnerable and are denied of their most universal fundamental rights. Ultimately, who must take the blame? Kinosi Kwene, Unfiltered, on the SABC channel 404.
Welcome back to Unfiltered. Minister Mkhunu, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much to you and the viewers.
Could we just get some quick updates on the death toll? The last we heard is 22. Are you aware that that's still the number, or have there been any updates?
Yes, I'm aware. It's 21 in Gauteng and then 1 in the Free State.
And in terms of your coordinating committee, how do you feel that committee has been moving? Has it been moving with the necessary speed to address this crisis?
Well, after the this outbreak, I was due to go to Lesotho for another project, and the day before I left, I delegated a number of responsibilities to the 2 deputy ministers, and I personally spoke to the acting minister, but I also spoke to the Minister of Health, who was overseas, and spoke to his deputy, and I spoke to the MSc for Health in Gauteng that possibly they meet and they craft how they would handle the matters as a joint effort. And I think they've done well in terms of looking at those who are affected, both in the hospital and at home, and keeping South Africans well informed about what is happening, and interacting with any other stakeholder, including the media. And for that, we thank them very much.
Do you feel that this was a crisis that maybe needed you to rush back from the Lesotho Highlands project where you were overseeing events? You're only meeting with the mayor tomorrow. Isn't that a bit late? Shouldn't we have had this meeting of the key players in national and local government yesterday?
One of the things that we said need to happen, and indeed happened, was that we needed to assemble a team of professionals and technical people from both DWS and the municipality, so that they could collect all the necessary information on a technical basis, put it together, come up with a concrete proposal. They finalized that. That's why we're meeting tomorrow.
And where are we with the investigation into the source of this problem? Because there have been diverging statements from different government officials. Do you have any clarity yet on exactly where this problem originated?
You are aware. Various stakeholders have made their investigations. I met one private company today. They were saying they've done their investigation. What we're doing now from tomorrow is to coordinate all this information so that we don't confuse the public. We collect all of that, we put it under one or two authorities that are independent of ourselves, and once they have completed all the analysis comprehensively, they will then go public and give the public something coordinated, something comprehensive, both especially from health and from water.
Do you have any idea of when that might be? Because Deputy Minister Mahlobo suggested some of these tests could take a week. Is that how long we might have to wait to ascertain the source?
We might have to wait for a week or just a little longer than a week, but we said they must start tomorrow.
And are you satisfied, Minister, given the length of time the coordinating committee has taken to come together, the length of time we're going to wait for these results, that things are moving with the required urgency? Yes. and expedition?
Yes, if we had a way of cutting short the work that they are doing and therefore cutting on the days, we would. I would have said let's do it that way. But the most important thing, even beyond what we're talking about, is how do we and when do we stop what is happening there, which is the cause of the whole of this thing. And that is what tomorrow is about in the main. But I'm not undermining the need to come up with all the facts and comprehensive information. That's very important. And that's what I'm saying. If we had a way, even today we would have had that.
Death as a result of cholera is a grueling and terrifying process. This is a disease that was eradicated in many parts of the world many, many decades ago. Who do you think is ultimately responsible for this crisis and tragedy?
Up until now, that media, like yourself and I think SABC that interviewed me, was it SABC that interviewed me while I was in Lesotho? Up until they asked that question, there was no question about who is responsible for water in Hammanskraal and the whole of Tshwane, and Hammanskraal is part of Tshwane. In terms of legislation and in terms of water services provision, it is Tshwane that is responsible for that. Tshwane municipality. Now, once this crisis break up, I can imagine that it is only fair for people to ask who is responsible. And I want to repeat, Tshwane municipality is responsible. But after this, it is clear to us that the matters are now beyond Tshwane, and they require our involvement. They require our leadership as the Department of Water and Sanitation to intervene in the situation. The mayor of Tshwane Mayor Brink has come out very clear that they don't have capacity to deal with the matter. They don't have all the money. They might have just a portion of it. They might not have all the money. They're still looking for additional money. They don't have. They have difficulties with supply chain, and there's evidence for that is the fact that at some point, money was set aside for the upgrades in Rooiwal. A tender was awarded, but work never got completed. Now, all those things show that there are difficulties in the municipality to turn the corner on this matter, and therefore it requires intervention. And that is what the meeting tomorrow is about, to craft a model of that intervention between us and Tshwane, to say this is the model that is credible, this is the model that will deliver, this is the model that will deliver within a specified time, and tied to that, there must be a model of funding.
And Minister, I
yes.
do want to get onto the model, and I think we do need to spend
Yes.
time on where to from here.
Yes.
But as far as the question of who should be held accountable for this crisis, the calls for national intervention into the Hammanskraal water disaster have been long in the making. This crisis has been long in the making. And
Yes.
so doesn't your department, or don't you bear some responsibility for not acting fast enough, not intervening fast enough, when it was clear for many observers to see that this was a problem that was beyond the capacity of Tshwane?
Between 2011 and 2023, there have been 6 directives that have been issued by our department to Tshwane. That was first intervention, to say, you need to go there, you need to fix that water treatment plant because it has got this problem, and this this needs to be stopped. 6 directives, all of which ended nowhere. And this is in terms of procedure and in terms of legislation. Other than that, there was, when I came in August 2021, I went into this matter, and that's when I discovered that there have been a series of interventions, but they have not been effective because Tshwane, as a municipality, have not didn't heed these interventions. In other words, they didn't respond in a manner that was expected of them. Now, I then made an attempt. Now, there's one important thing here. Minister of Water and Sanitation can intervene in a municipality where there's failure. And this is exactly what, this is in terms of Section 63. But Section 63 doesn't apply alone. It must be applied together with Section 139, which would have required Gauteng provincial government to impose it in Tshwane or to Tshwane, and then we would then impose Section 63.
Why hasn't that happened yet, Minister?
Well, Gauteng provincial government did impose it. Tshwane opposed it. They took the provincial government to court and they won the case, and therefore blocked whatever would have been intervention by provincial government, by national government. What we then did on our own, we wrote to the then mayor and said to the mayor, let's put aside whatever. The problem requires the Department of Water and Sanitation to intervene in order to deal with this matter at hand. Let us cooperate. Could you cooperate with me to ask that Gauteng government impose this section? You don't oppose it, just for the sake of enabling us to intervene, because even if you refuse, just like you are resisting, you have no way, you are not doing anything about this. The most important thing that you are doing is to resist intervention. In other words, it amounts to resisting assistance from other spheres of government. Now, I have a letter which was written to me, and it even has a specific word: reject any allusion to any indication or any intention on our part to intervene. They ended up saying, if you have money, give us your money, but not your intervention. Now, obviously, there was rejection. Now, these are the things that have been happening on the side of National Department of Water and Sanitation, trying to intervene, trying to get in. Of course, one thing that we couldn't do, we couldn't act unlawfully. We couldn't just walk there with pigs and so on and start working. It doesn't happen that way. Now, tomorrow is about reviewing all this process, all these processes, and saying to ourselves, saying to Tswana, saying to ourselves, if a problem, I mean, there are even indications that the problem got identified as far back as 2004 to Tswana municipality. But they've never been able to. So surely they must be satisfied now that they have taken their time dealing with this, but the problem is not where, and is not anywhere towards resolution. And now we're sitting with 17 or 21 lives that have passed, and that is a national tragedy.
Minister, let's continue the conversation after the break. Thank you for joining us on Unfiltered. We're in conversation with Minister of Water and Sanitation, Mr. Senzo Kumi. We'll be back after this to delve further into the cholera crisis in Hammanskraal. Stay with us. Welcome back to Unfiltered. We're discussing with Minister Senzo Kumi the Hammanskraal water crisis and broader questions of water access in South Africa. Minister, thanks again for joining us. Before we left on the break, we were talking about which part of the government deserves the blame for this crisis. And you made an impassioned case that this falls squarely on Tshwane, which of course has been run by successive DA governments or DA-led coalition governments. But this crisis also, and you're on record as saying, traces back to at least 2004. And so in many ways, although you're a relatively new minister in that timescale, the ANC-led government ran Tshwane for 22 years, I believe. So it ultimately all points back to the same crisis of governance in the ANC-led government, doesn't it?
Well, you could put it like that, if it's your opinion. But I want to play down the issue of party politics when we talk about water, because part of the poison comes exactly from that particular angle. I'm not saying all of a sudden political parties don't exist, and that where they can play a role, like in a municipality like that one, they should. And where they are governing, they should do well. They should govern well. And therefore, if they don't, they should take part of, take part of the blame and so on. But in essence, whoever becomes responsible for an institution like a municipality, like provincial government, national government, you must know where you are, and you must know your responsibilities, and you must perform your responsibilities. And that is the bottom line. And therefore, yes, it's according to what I read somewhere, 2004 problem. And various mayors have been coming in and out, coming from different political parties. But the bottom line is that Tshwane municipality has been dealing with this matter for ages, and all has failed. And we now have to put a stop to failure and start a new era as far as that is concerned.
And there can be no doubt that the current mayor, previous mayors, whether we're talking about Mayor Msimanga or Mogalapa, have their share of blame, and rest assured we will not spare them from questioning. But when you say that it's important that those who led the municipality should know that this is unacceptable, there were many warnings given to the last mayor of Tshwane from the ANC government, and far from feeling accountability, he's now one of your colleagues in cabinet. He's been promoted to minister despite many warnings while he was mayor of Tshwane that this was a major crisis. So in actual fact, those who ran Tshwane and were warned of this haven't been held accountable. They've actually been promoted and celebrated.
Let me take them and bind them, all of them. And just the recent one is Williams. He was Williams. I don't know where he has gone to. He may have been promoted wherever he is. And then before that one, you were saying if it was Remokupa, he's where he is now. You could also look at Soli. He's where he is. So it means that let's put aside where they went to after. Let's just say up to now, there's been failure in terms of dealing with the issues of water in Hammanskraal, irregardless of who has been there, irregardless of who has gone where. The matter remains there, and that is what we need to tackle and bring to the fore and tackle from now onwards.
And I appreciate that you're in something of a difficult position as the minister who's just come in. But my worry is that, and I think I agree with you in terms of all the mayors, it doesn't seem as if anyone across the government has actually been held accountable for this. Is there a deeper crisis of accountability when it comes to water matters, or not holding people from across the political spectrum accountable for these water questions?
Not at all difficult. Tshwane municipality, headed by the executive mayor there, is responsible for what, whoever they have been, up to the current mayor. That position is not vacant. It has a mayor, and he has to carry the responsibility of what we are talking about right now. But I'm then saying, taking stock of what has been happening in Tshwane, and taking what the current mayor has been saying in public, and what he said to me when we met in Cape Town last Wednesday, I'm satisfied that there has to be intervention there. I have then asked him that we meet tomorrow at 10, and he has agreed to that. He will come with his team. We will go there as TWS. We will meet. Now, one of the things that we have to bring to the fore is to say, can't we agree that looking at the history and the historical developments of what has happened in Hammanskraal, isn't it ugly enough that if we wanted ugliness, we should be satisfied with what we've seen all along, and therefore say, close the chapter. We now know how ugly it is. We know how it smells. We know how it looks like. And we know the damage and the embarrassment it has caused to them. We have had enough of that. Let's start a new chapter. And that new chapter can't be just normal. It can't be left with the same mayor of the same municipality. Something has to change. And this is what, in part, the meeting tomorrow is about. To change that, because you cannot, from 2004, if that is true, from 2011, with the department writing directives, with attempts on their part, even a failed tender, with all of that, still come up and say, we still want to lead and bring about any change. Yes, there's a new mayor there, and I got the impression that it's different from the mayor that has been there, the last one, in terms of openness to discuss matters like these ones. From where I sit, this is a national crisis. and there needs to be an intervention from outside Tswane, from above Tswane. It's no longer a Tswane matter when that number of people lose their lives the way it has happened. That's why we are meeting tomorrow.
And what if the mayor doesn't act? What if the mayor doesn't come to the party in the way you hope he does? What steps will you be taking? And do you have any timelines on waiting to see what the mayor will do until you can escalate your steps?
One thing that is good that the executive mayor has done is to agree to a meeting. So we are meeting tomorrow. Now we'll only get out of that place where we're meeting after we have agreed. There's no way we can come out without an agreement in terms of what is it that we're going to do and what are the models, what will be the timelines, what will be the source of funding. We just have to agree on that. There's no way we can't agree. I can't imagine how we cannot agree.
It's going to be a fascinating cross-party agreement, cross-governmental branch agreement, and we await that. Minister, we're going to go to another break, and we'll come back and delve deeper into wider questions which the Hammanskraal water crisis is reflective of, and ask, is there a deeper crisis in the provision of water in South Africa? Stay with us. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Unfiltered. We're in conversation with Minister of Water and Sanitation, Senzo Kumi. Can I please remind you to tweet us at SABC Unfiltered, at Unfiltered SABC. Let's continue our conversation on social media. We have a fascinating social media conversation on this show, and we look forward to some of your thoughts, and we might even bring some of your views in to the show. Minister, this Hammanskraal crisis comes against a backdrop of a wider question of water and sanitation in South Africa and its developmental importance. And of course, one of the big questions that has loomed over water provision in South Africa, and indeed sanitation, is the fight against corruption. Do you think that your ministry has done enough to reassure South Africans that corruption will be eradicated so that it doesn't hamper the crucial decisions that need to be taken for water to be equitably distributed in South Africa?
Of course, in the Department of Water and Sanitation, we're up in arms against corruption. And that has been demonstrated by a number of incidents that have taken place. The last one was when the department, via corporate services, discovered that there was an employee who was double parked in terms of salaries, employed by us while at the same time drawing a salary from a municipality in one of the provinces. That was acted on quickly, on the spot, and hearings were done very quickly, and she was fired. No question about it. All the cases that we found pending there have been dealt with, or they are being dealt with. But there are others that have come, including from risk management, from water boards. All of them are being dealt with. And the last time I attended a very serious meeting with serious allegations was on Friday last week with a board, where we were giving them a report that they had sanctioned themselves, and results had come out, and they were handing over the report for action. So we don't hide anything that is untoward in that department. We deal with it with the attention that it will deserve. Now, whether we are convincing to South Africans, we can only say this is what we found and are finding. This is how we're dealing with what we are finding to be untoward, and assure them that anything that will come our way that is untoward will be acted upon. I learned this afternoon as well that SIU is already dealing with the preliminary investigation in Hammanskraal itself. I was happy with that information, and I wish them well, and we will cooperate with them on everything new and old as far as Hammanskraal is concerned. And I hope that Swane themselves, they will be able to come on board and cooperate with SIU. Because that's the only way that we can confront corruption, we can end corruption in the country. It needs to be confronted, it needs to be fought.
And you've made many unambiguous statements about your commitment to anti-corruption. But one can't run away from the fact that your deputy minister was mentioned in the Zondo Commission as having, quote, moved huge, unquote, amounts of cash. The evidence against him being, quote, overwhelming, and that his actions were, quote, fast and loose, and that the report continues to suggest, quote, the impropriety admitted no debate in terms of his action. So it's a bit difficult to imagine that there's a complete commitment to anti-corruption when at the top of the ministry there is someone over whom no less a figure than the Chief Justice has cast doubt and aspersion over their activities, albeit in another department.
Well, firstly, the person who is better placed, if not best placed, to answer your question or to respond there is the Deputy Minister himself and the law enforcement authorities that are better placed to deal with those matters. But I would say, I hear you saying right at the top. I'm not sure about that, but that's my answer for now, to say that, you see, when we get appointed to ministries and so on, we really are not necessarily at the top. We are just servants of the people of South Africa. We may be referred to as being on top. It's normal colloquial language, but in reality, we are servants of the people, and we're not above the law. And but on this matter, this is how I will put it to the Deputy Minister and to the relevant law enforcement agencies.
And can you reassure South Africans that if you were to see any wrongdoing, even with a colleague as close as that, or in any senior level of the department, you would take decisive action?
Of course, the main thing that the public needs to know, and want to assure them, is that we do our work transparently, and we have to be accountable. And we have to be accountable to every platform where we should be, but most importantly, we have to be accountable to the public, that is the South Africans themselves, and of course to government of the people of South Africa. We've got to do that, and it's part and parcel of governance, and part and parcel of good governance at that.
One of the main crises confronting the country, but of course the water system, is load shedding. And of course that's something that comes from the government on which you serve, although of course it's not your area of responsibility. How worried should we be as South Africans that this constant high stage of load shedding might plunge us into a simultaneous water crisis where we have to deal with water and electricity cuts, and that becomes as normal as load shedding has become?
Well, firstly, my colleague, Minister of Electricity, is dealing with energy, and he's sparing no energy into looking into this matter, resolving it. And we always are in support of his efforts and wish him well to deal with this matter successfully as soon as possible. But we're already getting interrupted by shortage of energy, because, as you would know, water is pumped via electricity to a large extent from dams and other sources, and then through treatment plants and through water pumps and so on, pump stations. Now, obviously, when there's load shedding, all those processes break down during load shedding in those different areas. To mitigate this, we have approached municipalities all over the country to say where you can negotiate with ESCOM, because you know each one of your reservoirs, how long it takes to fill it up, how long it takes for people to consume all the water right to the bottom of a reservoir. You can then go and negotiate and say, please, we need to fill up that reservoir. We need 30 minutes, we need an hour, whatever it takes.
How far are we with that process of exemptions?
It differs from area to area. There are agreements in some areas. They are struggling with agreements in other areas. But it's not something that seemingly is undoable. It's still there, the problem is there, but you hear positive stories in some cases that no, we have an agreement with ESCOM. They will spare us such that we fill up, and then they start load shedding, and that by that time our reservoirs are full, and we are distributing water. It's doable in some, but in some, like in Ekurhuleni, for instance, there was a time when it really was affecting us. We were getting no sleep from people complaining about lack of water, and we had many meetings, and finally we are in a better situation at the moment. So it's doable to a certain extent, just in terms of mitigating the problem.
I suppose my question is also, how worried should we be that we're on the brink of a serious crisis? Because you did say, for example, in Gauteng, I think it's 4,500 megaliters that are needed. We're 9% off that. So in Gauteng, we already know that without load shedding, just infrastructurally, we're not at the level we need to be. Now with load shedding, I think many people are just worried that we suddenly get a warning one day that in addition to electricity, now we also have to worry about water. I mean, many people in South Africa already have that worry, but that it might become more widespread.
In order to deal with that particular anxiety and that worry, which is also our worry, as far back as September last year, we've been interrogating this particular problem from the water resources management point of view to say, how many sources do we have? How much water are we getting from there? How much water do we have in storage, in other words? And how much water is getting into those storages? And what if there's drought? What if there's this and that? We have been dealing with that question. And today we had a symposium where we got more than 30 experts, including some of our international partners. They were there, Denmark and Kenya, and there was also, I think there was Sweden. Netherlands. Now, we met, and the question was, how do we ensure ourselves in the water sector that we are satisfied that the work that is being done is really in the right direction, such that it will quell this anxiety, and I'm satisfied with the outcome.
We're going to come back on that, Minister. We're going to just go to a quick break. Stay with us on Unfiltered as we discuss water questions with Minister of Water and Sanitation, Senzo Kumi. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to Unfiltered. We are going to take some of your tweets. We're in conversation with Minister Senzo Kumi around the Hammanskraal water crisis. And let's see what you've been saying on social media. Let's have a look at some of your tweets. Construction of revolutionary leadership. Corruption, mismanagement, and neglect by government authorities and officials have contributed to the water crisis in Hammanskraal. Local and provincial government officials who are responsible for the management of water and sanitation infrastructure must account. Chifiwa says government must stand up in this kind of situation, and political parties must stop pointing fingers on each other. People are dying, and they're campaigning for next year's elections. Not at all. And one final one from Mr. Jobe says the ANC should be blamed. Non-functional municipal sewage systems, corruption, power cuts. Just admit that you have failed. People are losing their lives. We also want to just give you some context with a graphic around questions of sanitation. And let's take a look at this graphic, which talks about the number of people still using pit toilets in South Africa. This is a question that cuts across multiple departments. 2019, 3.1 million. 2020, we saw a rise according to the 2020 municipal census report, going in the wrong direction. Minister, the wider question of access to decent sanitation and just poor black South Africans not having access to decent sanitation, that must keep you up at night, in addition to the many other things you've already said are keeping you up.
It does. This thing goes with dignity of those people. It goes with health standards for individuals, not just communities, pointing at communities, individuals. It is for this reason that last year we crafted what we call a national sanitation framework, which was adopted by Cabinet. We're now implementing it. And last week, we were targeting province number 1 to deal with this. First is banning buckets altogether, because we've been talking about this for a long time, but we've been lacking on decisive action that could actually deal with this. The national framework, when we develop all the regulations and so on, we seek to ban distribution of buckets as a form of sanitation. And then this thing called VIPs, this thing called pit latrines, only under certain circumstances, but based on certain standards and so on. And it's going to be incremental in terms of how we do this. But this is subject to bringing water to those places, and we're happy that even waterborne sanitation in South Africa doesn't have to take a similar amount of water everywhere at the same time. You can do sanitation with a less amount of water, and this is technology that is coming into the market, and we're going to be implementing that. And therefore, yes, some of, pit toilets and even bushes, no longer acceptable if they were ever acceptable.
I think there was a proposal to eliminate the bucket system by 2014 at some point. We're coming to the 10-year anniversary of the failure of that promise. Do we have a date by which we can guarantee that that inhumane system is eradicated?
We have a date, but it's a different format that we are doing. As I'm saying, we are starting with province number 1. There are 3 provinces that are worrying us, but we've started with province number 1 out of the 3. And there we have zoomed into particular settlements to say how many buckets are there and how are we going to make sure. And we are saying we are going to go to that province in 2 weeks' time from now. And we are going to say we're talking about that particular area. And this is the number of buckets. And we are seeking an agreement. One of the agreements that we'll be seeking is to say the mayor here will no longer distribute any bucket. And therefore, when we eliminate this number of buckets, there won't be any others, because that's what has been happening. One of the things that has been happening, escalating the number after whatever work would have been done after that. But now we are going to be going systematically. Now, I rather say in 2 weeks' time we are going to that province to start seeking an agreement. That will have timeframes, that will have everything, funding and so on. Then we'll go to the next. At some point, we'll be able to say, we're making progress, what is remaining is this, and then we'll give you the exact timeframe in terms of completing that. But it is one of our main, our Department of Water and Sanitation, it is worrying us that sanitation tends to lag behind. But water itself is a problem, but sanitation is lagging even behind water.
In terms of where we started this interview and just the crisis, the immediate crisis, what are the next steps, the way forward in terms of ensuring that we're dealing with neighboring countries? We're also making sure that cholera is not spreading. We know that there were reports of Limpopo and the Free State. Where to from here in terms of containing and reversing this crisis that we're in?
Well, that's the issue that Department of Health is better placed to respond to. But from the water point of view, in that water is one of the vehicles that facilitate the spread, we have to do our responsibility. And this is in line with SDG 6, where we have to expand the horizon in terms of reaching out to people who have no access to water. We're into it via a lot of projects, the number of which I can't finish in this country, per province, by us, to just make sure that we accelerate accessing water to people everywhere in the country. We still have a backlog, but we're doing what we can as speedily as possible. One of the demonstrations, what we're doing in Lesotho on Tuesday, about which we are very happy, because that's one of the main or major schemes that will increase water security in a number, about 5 provinces via the Vaal water system.
Can we talk
very happy with
briefly about that? Because just in the final minute, that project was promised in 2019, but you've been focusing quite a lot on that project.
Yes.
It's a major dam which will be pumping water into South Africa. Do you think that will be coming on
by
stream?
2027? We're on course for 2027, even though we lost time. But the way it has been recrafted and rebranded, and we are sure that given, possibilities, weather may not interfere and all of that, just given the commitment to the contractors who are already on the ground, and we saw them, we believe that we should be on course to complete that project by 2027, and work is continuing right away.
Minister Mkhunu, it's always a pleasure when a public official puts themselves forward to answer questions. Thank you so much for joining us on Unfiltered. And
thank you so much for being our partner for the whole hour, talking about water and sanitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much again for joining us on Unfiltered. We learned what the national government is doing in terms of addressing this crisis in Hammanskraal of cholera. We investigated questions of corruption, Gauteng's water crisis, and also some of the solutions going forward to questions of sanitation. You be the judge if we're on the right path. Let's continue this conversation on social media at Unfiltered SABC. And thank you so much for joining us for Unfiltered News and Unfiltered Views. We'll see you on the next installment of Unfiltered. Have a good evening.